So once in a while, right, the range of iPads you can buy makes sense. And then Apple thinks, no, I can't be having that. Let's shake it up. This week, they've done a little bit of shaking up. They've shaken up a little by bringing out two new versions of the iPad Air. I think the iPad Air is kind of like the sweet spot in the entire iPad lineup for the price and the features you get. But actually, if you want to be awkward, you could go the other way and say the iPad Air costs more than the regular iPad and it isn't as good as the iPad Pro. Either way, it's in the middle, and this week's update, is small. To the iPad Air, even smaller though, is a second iPad update that's come out this week, and one that you practically have to search for. And also, I mean, this is a Dear Diary moment. Apple has actually made something fractionally cheaper than it was before, but I should say it's not any of the iPads, it's an important accessory. Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is 58 Keys, which, as ever, as always, is for writers. Writers like you and me who use and you write on Macs and iPhones, but also particularly today, iPads. Do subscribe or like or join the 58 Keys Patreon, because frankly, someone's got to stop me evangelizing about the iPad. I'm really off on one these days. I mean, I thought I liked my iPad. Okay, that's very nice for me. But then a few months ago, I had like this iPad renaissance. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been using mine even more, and so much even more, that I was actually thinking I was having an iPad renaissance. They're really that good. And then this week's new versions came out. Specifically, if you don't happen to have already seen all about this, Apple has launched two new versions of the iPad Air, and alongside them, two new versions of the Magic keyboards for the iPad Air. First, the iPad Air. As before, there is an 11-inch and there is a 13-inch iPad Air. You're going to find that the 11-inch one is the most portable, it's the most convenient, it's the cheaper of the two. It's the best mix of size and cost, but you're going to want the 13-inch model. I had the original 12.9 inch. That's the same size. Apple just calls it 13 now for convenience, I suppose. I had the original 12.9 inch version of the iPad Pro back in 2015, and you can't believe how fantastic it is. It's like having two iPads side by side, and you really feel as if your fingers inside your work. You feel like you are kneading the work like bread. And you do also feel as if Apple has reached its fingers into your bank account and taken out a lot of bread. That might just be a very English phrase there. The larger screen iPads, okay, they are, of course, the most expensive. Until last year, until 2024, you could only get a larger 13-inch iPad if you bought the much more costly iPad Pro. I did buy an iPad Pro back in 2021, but I went for the 11-inch model solely because I just could not justify the cost of the 13-inch at the time. Now, I know I made the right choice financially. I think I made the right choice because actually of how much I carry my iPad Pro around still, but I miss the larger size. As of 2024 though, the iPad Air started to come in the larger 13-inch size, and it's cheaper than the iPad Pro. Okay, as of this week, the new versions of the iPad Air also come in these two sizes, 11 and 13 inches, and they're still cheaper than the iPad Pro, so this is all very good. What this means, I think, is that the larger screen version is now available, is now possible for more people, and as of this week, in a faster device. The iPad Pro, it's faster still. It has an M4 processor, while the big change, really the only change with this week's new iPad Air, is that it has moved up to an M3 processor. You don't need to know what the processor specifications are. I mean, if you do, good. I can count on one finger how often I've cared about a specification, and even then I'd be rounding up. But the higher the M number is, the better, the faster. And these days, actually, regardless of the M and the processor, all of the iPads available are too fast and too powerful for what you and I need as writers. What we need as, say, publishers or photographers, or what we need as audio and video editors, yeah, well, that's something else. But for writing, if you have last year's iPad Air, stick with it. If you have an older one than last year, well, you definitely notice the size difference if you go to the larger 13-inch model, and depending on just how old your older iPad Air is or other models of the iPad, you may well notice a difference in speed. As ever, actually, I don't really care about speed per se. I care about performance, responsiveness. Go from any iPad to a Kindle Scribe, for instance, and not only will you pull your hair out at how slow it is, you'll have time to pull your hair out before it does anything. Breathe. But then, like I say, all iPads, well, they're either fast or they're pretty fast. If you're in the market for an iPad, this week's new ones don't change what you need to consider, but there are things you need to consider. The iPad Air comes in the middle-ish, like I say. It comes in the middle if you forget the excellent iPad mini, if you kind of push that to one side. Push that to one side, and then your choices are the base iPad, the iPad Air, and the iPad Pro. It's like Goldilocks, really, isn't it? The advantage of the iPad Pro, the most costly one, is that it is faster still. It has much better performance on, really strenuous tasks. I mean, not strenuous for you and me, but for the device, video editing, for example, and it has a screen that is either much better or much, much better, depending on how much cash you're willing to throw at it. The iPad at the other end, the base model, the one that isn't an Air or a Mini or a Pro, it has the advantage that it's the cheapest. And it's also been updated this week. That's the one you could miss. Apple hasn't made a big deal of this, hasn't really announced that it's updated the basic iPad, but it has as of this week. The new base iPad, it's an 11-inch iPad. Well, it still costs from £329 or $349. Actually, compare that to the iPad Air. That starts at £599 or dollars for the 11-inch model, £799 or dollars for the 13-inch model. So there's roughly a £250 or a difference between the iPad Air and the base iPad. So, iPad looking good. Oh, and for completeness, the iPad Pro starts at it's £1,000 or dollars for the 11-inch model, or $1,300 for the 13-inch model. And all of those prices are starts at. The only good starts at change this time is that the base iPad now comes with 128 gigabytes of storage. Before it was 64 gigabytes, and that was just woefully inadequate, I promise you. Now the iPad, the iPad Air and the iPad Mini, they all start with 128 gigabytes. If I bought one of these iPads today though, I'd still stump up the cash to take that to at least 256 gigabytes, which is $100 or £100 more on the iPad, the iPad Air and the iPad Mini. The iPad Pro is different. That just starts at 256 gigabytes. A quick way to decide whether you're going to spend all the cash on an iPad Pro is to realise that you already know. Either you already know that you need the very fastest performance and the very best screen possible, or I suppose you know that you have the disposable income. So, equally, you would think that the quick way to decide if you're going to be happy enough instead going for the cheapest iPad is that it is the cheapest, but it's more complicated with that one. It's not quite so clear. Anyway, because, very surprisingly, actually, Apple has updated the base iPad, but it has not added Apple Intelligence to it. Now, okay, so far, you might not care about Apple Intelligence. I mean, it's definitely the dullest of all the AI tools out there, but what it does well, which actually you can't always say about, the flashier, whiz-bang, world domination kind of AI options that we keep being told about. Plus, Apple Intelligence is going to keep getting better. And all right, if you're still not convinced, try this. The future resale value of an iPad without Apple Intelligence is going to be less. The base iPad, otherwise, it's very good, but it is slower. It only works with the more basic Apple Pencil, and you can't get a magic keyboard for the base iPad, which is the other thing that's been updated this week. And actually, it's the thing I said was a Dear Diary moment. The new magic keyboards for the iPad Air are $30 cheaper than the old ones, and it's about the same, about £30 here in the UK. Short version about the magic keyboard, still a daft name, but it's still a superb keyboard, and it has actually been made better. Really, the most dangerous thing I think I did after buying an iPad Pro back in 2021 was walk into an Apple store and try out the Magic Keyboard. Yeah, look, I did not hand over my credit card and walk out with one that day. I have powers of resistance. It took a week before I ordered mine. They're that good. Okay, the keyboard is excellent. The trackpad on the Magic Keyboards is very good. And they're also cases that protect the iPad. Two things to think about though. As cases, they're great at protecting the front and the back of the iPads. But even this week's new Magic Keyboards do not very well protect the sides and the corners. So a sharp fall on a corner, you have a good chance of shattering the iPad. Painful thought. And then there's this. As much as I like the Magic, I really like the Magic Keyboard for iPad, I have actually regretted buying one, because once I did, I started treating my iPad as like a little laptop. But if you take the keyboard off, if you use the iPad as an iPad and you hold it and you touch it, the iPad is all the better for it. Still, for getting a lot of writing done, you really benefit from a proper keyboard instead of typing on the glass. You can type on the glass, but a keyboard is good. You could buy any Bluetooth keyboard and it will pair with the iPad. And actually, equally, you can get other cases that have keyboards built in. Logitech has some. But overall, the Apple Magic Keyboard for the iPad Air is the best combination of case and keyboard, and it has just been updated. It's also, though, always the most expensive option, even with this new version's price drop. What's also new about the new versions of the Magic Keyboard is that the trackpad has been made larger, and I don't think that sounds like more than a shrug, but truly, if you go between machines that have different size trackpads, the bigger the better. And also the new Magic Keyboard has a row of function keys across the top. And again, shrug, except it means you can change the brightness or the volume directly from the keyboard instead of having to reach up the screen and fiddle there. The Magic Keyboard for iPad Pro got this last year. Now the iPad Air Magic Keyboard has it. Whether all of that is worth the money is one question, but what I think isn't a question at all is that after you've bought one, you'll be very happy with it. I said that about the Magic Keyboard, but actually it's true of the iPad, or at least it's true of most iPads. I worry that the very base model would leave you wishing you bought an iPad Air, but otherwise, get an iPad Air, an iPad Pro, or indeed the tremendous iPad Mini, and you will be very, very pleased with it. Just use me as an example. A writer who uses iPads extensively, I do not need to buy a new iPad Air. My 11-inch iPad Pro from 2021 is still perfect and will last for years more. Damn it. I am really tempted because I so miss that larger screen. Right now, though, talking to you, I am resisting. But we'll see. While I fight against temptation, that's it for this edition of 58 Keys. Do remember, by the way, totally unrelated, the 58, well, it's related because it's 58 Keys, 58 Keys writing workshop videos. Those come out on YouTube every Monday. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourself, okay? And I'll see you soon.